The villagers of Ebanji watched in awe. They gossiped in market stalls and under mango trees. Did Malu find treasure? Buried in the fields? Perhaps he inherited money from a lost uncle. No, another would whisper. He must have been blessed by the mountain gods. Even those who had once laughed behind Malu's back now bowed when they passed him. Old friends who had cut ties with him during his days of poverty now returned with wine, gifts, and empty praises. Malu welcomed them politely, but he never forgot. Their sudden kindness felt like sugar-coating old poison. He smiled, but didn't trust. At home, their children thrived. They wore the finest tunics, had shoes for the first time, and went to bed full. Yarrow and Kendi now dreamed of building their own farms, and little Simi read storybooks by lamplight. But while everyone around her basked in the luxury, Loma's heart never rested. She loved seeing her children happy, but the silence around the source of the wealth clung to her spirit like fog. One evening, as the orange dusk cast golden light through their windows, Loma turned to Malu while they sat in their richly decorated new living room. "Malu," she said softly, "I am grateful for all this, but I need to ask again, how did this happen? So suddenly, so powerfully? I see the joy on our children's faces, but I also feel something unsettled in my chest." Malu took her hand, his gaze steady but heavy. "The gods heard our prayers, Loma. I made a promise to forces older than us. They asked for faith, not sacrifice. And in return, they gave us a better life." She held his hand tighter. "I trust you, but sometimes the most beautiful fruit hides a bitter seed. Please, whatever happens, promise me we'll stay together. That our hearts won't change with our fortune. I promise," Malu replied. "No gold can ever replace this family." But as the days turned into weeks, and the gold never stopped coming through mysterious gifts, surprise trades, and deals that always seemed to tip in his favor, Loma began to notice something else. Malu was changing. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he stared off for long minutes as if listening to something only he could hear. He would wake in the middle of the night, sweating, muttering in his sleep. His laughter, once full and free, now came in short bursts that didn't reach his eyes. He spent more time alone, often visiting the edge of the forest, standing where the trees thickened into the unknown. He said it was for business, but Loma could feel the distance growing. And one evening, as she watched him sit alone at the fire with his back to her, shoulders stiff and head bowed, she knew the wealth had come with something else, something invisible, something watching. Loma knew Malu's heart, how deeply he loved his family, how fiercely he worked for their happiness. But as she watched him now, draped in robes finer than any chief, surrounded by treasures they once could never dream of, she began to wonder, was the cost of their blessing greater than they had imagined? For now, they lived in comfort. The village of Ebanji buzzed with gossip and awe. Malu, once the man mocked for wearing worn sandals and patched clothes, was now a figure of power and respect. People told stories of his transformation like it was legend, and with the wealth came old faces. The same friends who once mocked Malu's empty pockets now arrived at his compound daily, bearing baskets of fruit, jugs of palm wine, and grinning with artificial warmth. "Malu, old friend," one of them said one afternoon, settling into his grand living room lined with polished wooden chairs and golden drapes. "Look at you. You've risen higher than any of us. We're truly happy for you." They laughed too loudly, their compliments dripping with curiosity more than kindness. "You must tell us," another added, leaning forward with interest. "How did you achieve such fortune? In just weeks, your life has turned to gold." Malu smiled gently but felt the tightening in his chest. "The gods have blessed me," he said evenly. "They saw our pain and rewarded us." The men exchanged quick glances. One furrowed his brow. We believe you, of course. But surely there's more to it, Malu. You can trust us. We're your brothers." "I've told you all I can," Malu replied calmly. "It was not something I earned with a scheme or a shortcut. The gods give as they choose, but they would not relent." Over the following days, the visits became more frequent, the questions more pointed, the gifts more extravagant. One brought a bag of imported cloth. Another offered a piece of land if Malu would share his method. "Think of what we could do together," one friend said. "We could build estates, start businesses, rule the entire region. Don't keep the blessing all to yourself." But Malu remained unmoved. His eyes never left theirs as he answered, "This path was not meant to be shared. What was given to me came with a burden and a silence I cannot break." Disappointed and suspicious, the friends began to fade away once more. Their smiles turned to whispers. Around the market stalls and village wells, tongues wagged. Maybe he made a deal with spirits. Perhaps he stole from a shrine. "I heard he visited the forest and never came back the same." Malu heard the rumors. He felt them in the glances that lingered too long, in the silence that followed his footsteps. The same people who once praised him now spoke with fear behind his back. And though he had gold and land and more food than they could eat, Malu found himself yearning for the days of dusty feet and honest hands. He missed the days when friendship was simple, even if poverty sat beside it. At home, Loma noticed the change in him, the way he sat alone longer, the way his shoulders sagged, the way his smile came slower. One evening, as the lantern flickered on their veranda and the children played. In the yard, she touched his arm gently. "Malu," she said, "you look like a man with the world in his hands, but pain in his eyes." He didn't answer at first. He simply looked out into the dark, where the wind rustled through distant trees. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "I feel like I traded freedom for gold." Loma's heart ached. She leaned into him, whispering, "Then let's not lose who we are, even if we have everything else." Malu nodded, but in his heart, the silence of the forest still echoed, and the price of his secret pressed heavier than ever. One quiet evening, as the sky turned to liquid gold and the children's laughter echoed in the background, Loma noticed her husband's silence. They sat together on the veranda, the warm breeze brushing past them. "Malu," she said softly, placing her hand over his, "what troubles you? Your eyes carry a weight you haven't spoken of." Malu sighed deeply, his chest heavy with thoughts. "They keep asking, Loma. The men who once avoided me now crowd around me with questions. They don't believe the blessings came from the gods. They press me every day, wanting answers I cannot give." Loma squeezed his hand gently. "Then let them talk. We know the truth and we have each other. That's what matters most. We stood together in the storm. We can stand in the sun too." He looked at her, grateful, but still unsure of the path ahead. "The road is darker than I imagined," he murmured. And Loma, her voice steady, said, "Whatever comes, we'll face it as a family." That night, Malu found strength in her words. His heart still held fear, but it also held something stronger, love. Whatever trials came, he would protect his family at all costs. But peace would not last. Just as the sun melted into the horizon the following evening, a stranger arrived at their gate. He wore a simple cloak, and his face was unreadable. In his hand was a folded note sealed with dried leaves. "This is for Malu," the man said quietly, "from the old one." The moment Malu saw the seal, a cold dread flooded his veins. He hadn't heard from the old man since the ritual, but he had always known this day would come. The next morning, with legs heavy as stone, Malu walked the lonely path back to the Obika forest. The trees stood taller, now darker, whispering among themselves as he passed. He reached the old hut, its roof draped with vines and shadows. The old man was waiting. "Malu," he said, his voice echoing like the rustle of dry leaves. You knew this day would come. The gods demand what is owed. Malu's breath caught in his throat. What do they want? The old man's eyes gleamed, ancient and merciless. A sacrifice. Your daughter, Simi, she must be offered to the gods. Malu's heart stopped. He stumbled backward, nearly collapsing. No, not Simi. She's just a child. She's my heart. The old man's face remained unmoved. The gods gave you everything. Now they demand their price. If you refuse, they will take her, but not gently. Your wealth will vanish, your sanity will crumble, and your name will rot in disgrace. Malu dropped to his knees. Please, she's innocent. There must be another way. Take me instead. But the old man shook his head. The gods do not take what is offered willingly. They take what is most loved. You have 7 days. Malu returned home in silence, the weight of the world crushing his shoulders. He couldn't speak. He couldn't sleep. Sami ran into his arms that night, laughing, holding a drawing she had made. I drew our house, Papa. See? And you're smiling. He tried to smile, but his soul was breaking. He couldn't tell Loma. Not yet. How could he say it? How could he look her in the eyes and say the life they had built came with the cost of their daughter? Each day passed like a slow death. Malu wandered through his fields, stared at the horizon, barely speaking. At night, he heard the forest calling. In his dreams, Simi stood at the edge of the woods, whispering his name. He had everything: gold, power, respect. But now he stood to lose the only thing that truly mattered. And as the 7th day crept closer, Malu realized a truth he had tried to bury. There was no such thing as wealth without sacrifice. Malu paced the floor like a man caught in a storm with no shelter. His mind was in pieces. I can't do this to her, he whispered to himself again and again. But every whisper was drowned by the booming echo of the old man's voice. You have 7 days, or the gods will take her themselves. During the day, he watched Simi play in the yard barefoot and free, her laughter echoing like bells through the compound. Each giggle pierced his heart like a knife. She's my only daughter, he thought, eyes filling with tears. But then the dark thoughts crept in, the whispers of fear, of ruin, of madness. You still have 2 sons, the fear said. They'll carry your name, they'll understand. You're doing this for all of them. Malu knew it was monstrous. But the weight of dread had twisted his thinking. Loma noticed the change. She watched his distant eyes, the trembling hands, the sudden silences. Malu, she asked one evening, what is happening to you? He turned away. Nothing, he muttered. Everything will be fine. But it wasn't. Each day that passed felt like a noose tightening around his soul. On the 5th day, Malu, broken and hollow, made the decision. Not because he wanted to, but because he believed he had no choice. He told himself it would protect the rest of his family. He told himself the gods had left him no other road. That night, as the moon hung like a cold witness in the sky, Malu prepared the ritual as instructed. He ground herbs into a bitter drink and poured dark oil into a gourd. His hands trembled as he mixed the potion, knowing it would silence the child he loved most in the world. His heartbeat was thunder in his chest. Simi was outside, playing with her dolls in the fading light. Simi, he called softly, come here, sweetheart. She ran to him without hesitation, smiling brightly. Yes, Papa, he forced a smile. Drink this and use this oil on your skin. It's important. Simi looked at the strange bowl, confused, but trusted him completely. Okay, Papa, she said. She drank. Minutes later, her eyes fluttered and she fell limp into his arms. Malu sobbed silently as he carried her toward the forest, every step a betrayal, every breath an agony. By the time he reached the clearing, the world felt colder than ever. He laid her gently in the center of the stone circle, her little chest rising and falling, unaware of the horror her father was about to commit. "I'm so sorry, Simi," he whispered, kissing her forehead, his tears dripping onto her skin. "Forgive me." He turned toward the giant mortar the old man had prepared. Then a scream. "Malu, no! Loma!" She had followed him, her mother's heart unable to ignore the quiet dread that had grown in their home. She emerged into the clearing like lightning, her eyes wide with terror. Behind her, villagers poured into the forest, torches burning, eyes scanning the scene in disbelief. They saw the mortar. They saw Simi unconscious on the ground. And they saw Malu, his knees buckled, his face soaked in tears. Several men rushed in and pulled him away. Loma collapsed beside Simi, clutching her daughter, crying out her name. "What have you done, Malu?" she sobbed. "What were you going to do?" The villagers carried Simi back to the herbalist's hut, praying the potion had not taken her too far. They worked through the night with roots, herbs, and chants, trying to bring her back. Malu was left behind, tied beneath his own roof, surrounded by guards. His wealth, once his shield, could not protect him from the truth. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just sat there shaking. Outside, the villagers murmured, some in rage, some in sorrow. Loma didn't leave Simi's side. She rocked her, sang to her, wept into her hair. She couldn't understand how the man she had loved for so long could fall so far, so deep into fear. That night, Malu sat alone in the darkness, his soul unraveling. He had come within a breath of destroying everything he held dear, not because he was evil, but because he was desperate. The gods had given him gold, and then they had asked for blood. And now he finally saw the truth. What had been offered to him was never a blessing. It was a curse dressed in riches. As the first light of dawn broke over Abanji, the villagers gathered outside Malu's compound. The air was thick with murmurs. Shock, anger, disbelief. People who had once praised him now looked on with narrowed eyes and shaking heads. Inside the herbalist's hut, Loma sat at her daughter's bedside. Simi's small hand lay limp in hers, her breathing shallow but steady. The herbalist worked silently, grinding roots and applying cooling salves to draw out the poison. Loma's tears came quietly, not just for her daughter, but for the man she once believed would protect them at all costs. Outside, the crowd grew restless. How could he try to sacrifice his own child? Gold has poisoned his soul. He must answer for this. Finally, one of the elders stepped forward. His voice was loud and clear. "Malu must face justice. We will take him before the king." Bound and surrounded by the villagers, Malu was led through the streets he once walked with pride. His head was bowed, his eyes hollow. His beautiful robes had been stripped away, replaced with plain cloth. People stared at him with a mix of rage and pity. The whispers followed him like shadows. In the great hall of King Barima's palace, the air was still. The king sat on his carved throne, robes heavy with gold thread, his expression unreadable. As the villagers finished telling the story, silence fell like a hammer. The king's voice echoed through the hall. "Malu, is this true?" Malu, his knees trembling, fell to the floor. "Yes, my king," he said hoarsely. "It is all true. I was desperate. I was tricked." He told everything, the offer, the ritual, the old man, the gold that seemed to appear from nowhere. He spoke of Chief Damba, the man who offered him false hope wrapped in riches. "I never knew it would demand this, my daughter, my Simi. I would never hurt her, but I was afraid. I was weak." And Chief Damba disappeared after I agreed. He knew, he planned this. The king's jaw tightened. He turned to his guards. "Search the village. Bring Chief Damba to me." But hours later, the guards returned with grim news. Damba had vanished without a trace. His estate was abandoned. His name was now only a ghost. The king turned his gaze back to Malu. "You have committed a great sin," he said slowly, "but your daughter still lives, thanks to your wife's courage. I see the fear and manipulation that led you here, and though I cannot excuse what you almost did, I can see that you are already punished by your own conscience." He paused, then delivered his judgment. "You will spend the rest of your days in prison, not as a man forgotten, but as a man who must atone. Your family may visit you. You will work, you will reflect, and you will live with the consequences of the path you chose." Malu bowed his head low. "Thank you, my king," he whispered, tears slipping from his eyes. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." The villagers left the palace in silence. The man they once admired had fallen, and though his life was spared, his legacy had crumbled. That evening, Loma returned to the herbalist's hut. Simi stirred in her sleep, the color returning slowly to her cheeks. The healer nodded gently. She would recover. Loma knelt beside her daughter and held her close. Her heart was shattered, but somewhere within that brokenness flickered a small flame of hope. They would never be the same, but maybe, just maybe, they could still find a way to heal. As Malu was led away to his prison cell, the weight of his choices hung heavier than the chains on his wrists. Each step echoed with regret. The riches he had once believed would bring happiness had cost him everything that truly mattered: his dignity, his peace, and nearly the life of his precious daughter. He had been given a chance to rise from poverty, but the path he chose led not to freedom, but to ruin. Inside the dim prison walls, where time moved slowly and shadows whispered, Malu found a different kind of silence, the kind that makes a man reflect. He vowed that day to spend the rest of his life seeking forgiveness. Not just from the villagers, not even from the king, but from his wife, his children, and the innocent soul he had almost sacrificed. At night, as he lay on the cold floor, the distant sounds of the village reached him. The rhythm of drums, the laughter of children, the soft hum of life moving on without him. Yet instead of pain, Malu felt something unexpected, a flicker of peace. His family had survived. His daughter had lived. And somehow, through tears and heartbreak, Loma had forgiven him. Word of Malu's story spread through Abanji like wildfire, not as gossip, but as a warning. A tale of how greed, no matter how well disguised, always comes at a cost. And that the greatest treasures in life cannot be found in coins or gold, but in the love we give and the values we keep. Though Malu's body remained behind iron bars, his soul began to mend. His story had not ended in glory, but in a lesson that would live long after him. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know what you learned in the comments below. Share your thoughts. Like the video if you were moved by Malu's journey. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful African tales that stir the soul and Aztone teach timeless wisdom. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay grounded and treasure what truly matters.